Your greatest challenge becomes your greatest power. And I know that's probably not what you want to hear, but when it comes to Saturn, Saturn is here to teach us how to become the most powerful version of ourselves. Today, we're going to destigmatize Saturn from being the malefic, mean, villainous planet that it's made out to be, and tell you how you can use your specific Saturn placement to become the most powerful, unshakable version of yourself. Hola, my beautiful dreamers. Welcome back or welcome to my channel. My name is Marisa LaBlue, and I merge everything cosmic advice with everything self-development so we can become our dream selves every day. If that sounds like something you're interested in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. That way you don't miss future videos like this one. And be sure to follow me on other social media platforms so you can get more background astrology and spirituality content. Today's video is all about Saturn in astrology. I'm going to give you an introduction to Saturn so that way you understand what Saturn means in astrology. This is pinnacle to understanding your specific Saturn placement. Then I'm going to dive into each sign for you. And we're going to talk about what you're here to master and learn, because that is the main thing that Saturn covers. So without further ado, let's jump into what Saturn means in astrology. Saturn rules time, karma and past lives, authority, hierarchy, parenthood, and structure. You can see Saturn as the planet that is trying to actively give form to anything that is disorganized or chaotic. With that being said, Saturn often teaches us through some type of restriction and opposition. This is so we can learn how to be more disciplined, make more sound, mature decisions, and realize that we build meaningful values when we are not gluttonous, when we're not chaotic, when we're not all over the place, and we actually bring a sense of responsibility and duty to everything that we do. Because of this, wherever Saturn falls in your chart, it's likely that area of life does not come easily, and that is intentional. Saturn challenges the natural expression of the sign that it occupies, which forces you to slow down, mature, and earn the mastery of the sign that it resides in. A lot of times we'll find that we reject or resent our Saturn sign because we associate that with pain, trauma, and limitation, but Saturn's greatest, most rewarding gifts are hidden inside the deepest wounds. So Saturn kind of watches our choices, kind of like a parent. Saturn is considered the father of the planets, but he tends to sit back and watch our choices and tends to create a sense of karma around how we respond to certain hardships. And essentially what Saturn is doing when he does this is he's creating kind of a loop, but it's not necessarily Saturn doing this. It's more so that he's responding. You'll face a certain challenge, and I'm sure you have noticed a pattern of the type of challenges that come into your life. There is a theme there, and you might get increasingly frustrated wondering why that certain theme keeps coming into your life and why you can't seem to get out of it. This is somewhat of a karmic loop that is ruled by Saturn. Take myself, for example. Saturn is conjunct my sun in Pisces in the 11th house. Throughout my 20s, I faced a lot of challenges around community and my sense of self within those communities, which is the biggest theme in the 11th house. That is the house of community and humanitarianism. So whereas I always desire meaningful community and contributing to a community of some kind, which is what I do on this channel, or what I aim to do anyways, I was growing increasingly frustrated because I had repeated cycles of friendships that garnered betrayal and resentment and falling out, as well as romantic relationships that drained me and didn't resonate with me, and etc. The list goes on. And I learned through those loops that I was partially contributing to the repetition of the loop because I was not learning self-worth, independence in who I am, and I was not allowing myself to follow my highest resonance, which is following my intuition, being openly emotional and sensitive, and knowing that there's power in that. I was consistently betraying who I am for community, for relationship, for codependency. And that is a big lesson that was in my life. So with Saturn, you're meant to recognize whatever this loop is and what it's trying to tell you. It's only through what it's trying to tell you about yourself that you can emancipate yourself from that loop. What Saturn is essentially doing here is that it's trying to turn unconscious patterns of behavior and situations into unavoidable conscious experiences. It's through the pattern recognition that something often becomes conscious to us. That is essentially what Saturn is doing wherever it lies in your chart. It is because of this that Saturn often rewards discipline, integrity, endurance, persistence, whereas these are qualities that can be really difficult to embody, especially in this day and age where we look at a lot of short-term gratification and Saturn is all about long-term gratification. Saturn is essentially challenging your desire for short-term gratification, asking you if you're going to do what is necessary to receive the long-term rewards, which Saturn is anxiously waiting to give you if you lead a path of integrity and endurance and persistence and commitment. Essentially, your Saturn placement is challenging you to learn how to govern yourself and realize your autonomy in that way, that the power is within you and your inherent nature, your discipline, your boundaries, your self-authority. So it's not that Saturn is ever trying to deny you anything. Just like a father, Saturn wants to give you everything, but that is partially up to you. Saturn is just trying to present you with the facts so you will face the facts and own up to your power and who you are. If you've ever learned anything about manifestation, one of the biggest rules is that you cannot hold what you're asking for and what you desire if you have not built the ability to hold it yet. It's kind of like the ladder analogy. You can't just jump from the first rung of the ladder to the 10th rung. You have to climb rung by rung until you get to the top. That is essentially a perfect physical visualizer for Saturn. Saturn in Aries. With Saturn in Aries, we have a core theme of learning when to act and how to act in a healthy way. The reason for this is we have Saturn, the planet of karma, discipline, and commitment, in the sign of action, initiation, and potentially reckless behavior. When we think of Aries, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. So it is your first impression of the world, your first step into the world. And with that can sometimes be a tendency to be reckless and impulsive. Now, I'm talking about Aries itself as a sign. A lot of times what we see when we have Saturn in a certain sign is we tend to reject the nature of the sign that it's in. And I haven't seen anybody talk about this, but what we'll see happen is you will often lean on the traits of the opposite sign of Aries. So every zodiac sign shares an axis with another sign. And because of that, that axis has a theme that plays out differently between two signs, and each axis has a theme of self-liberation. So for Saturn in Aries, this lies on the Aries-Libra axis. So there's a lot of themes around autonomy and self-expression, as well as kind of how you conduct yourself around others and people-pleasing. So what will happen is a lot of times you may have experienced with Saturn in Aries situations that make you regret acting impulsively, or maybe people made you feel like you were too abrasive and you were very overwhelming of an energy to deal with. So what happens is you naturally regress into a nature that you think is serving you better, when actually it's killing your power and your soul. In this case, that sign would be Libra. So you may find that you have Saturn in Aries. You may rely on more people-pleasing tendencies, not having the ability to assert yourself properly and speak your mind and go after what you want. You may decide to kind of hide yourself and shrink yourself to please the whims of others and make sure that you are not disrupting the status quo and you're not disrupting the environments or the relationships that you have, when actually what you're supposed to do is learn how to properly hone that impulsivity and that recklessness, because impulsivity and recklessness don't have to be negative. But Saturn is all about learning how to properly channel and discipline and energy and focus it in a way that is beneficial to you and your life. And by doing so, that is how you achieve success in many forms. I don't just mean monetary success, even though Saturn has a lot to do with that, but I just mean ultimate fulfillment, ultimate autonomy over who you are, and confidence in exerting yourself in the world in a way that is fulfilling. So with Saturn and Aries, you have to learn how to hone that fiery, impulsive initiator energy, rather than having insecurity around being recognized by others. You are meant to step into who you are and shine for who you are authentically. Aries is not afraid to forge their own path or walk the path less traveled. Step into that power. I know there's something brimming inside of you, and that's why maybe as a child you didn't question that nature and you did go after what you wanted and you did express yourself properly. But at some point in time, you became jaded and you started diminishing that side of yourself. You started diminishing that fire, but that fire is asking to be sparked and fed once again. You yourself are meant to forge your own fire, not rely on others to feed your fire for you. That is not the way Aries starts. Aries is the first spark of astrology, the first spark of the cycle of the chapter that we're entering. You are that first spark, and that is your power. You're not supposed to blend in. You're not supposed to want what everybody else wants, and you're not supposed to follow the beaten path. That is okay. Those are not things to be insecure about. Those are things to be confident in. With that being said, trial and error is necessary. You may desire to make riskier, more daring decisions for the sake of being authentic to who you are. But you question it because other people have made you question it, or you have faced difficult situations because of leaning too far into that reckless behavior. But you are supposed to go through trial and error. Aries is the sign that's not afraid to try things that others are afraid to try. And that is where Aries unlocks the magic. That is where they forge the most power. You're right that reckless action isn't power, but focused action is power, especially with the powerful fire that Aries holds naturally. So if you have Saturn in Aries, you are here to learn a mature relationship with your instinct and how to follow that instinct in a way that serves you well, how to have a healthy ego and a controlled impulse, because you can struggle with ego and impulse, how to have courage rooted in self-trust rather than reactionary courage when somebody makes you mad or you just can't take it anymore. No, healthy courage that is rooted in self-trust and faith. Number 4 is leading from grounded confidence instead of constantly feeling like you have to prove yourself to everybody around you. Saturn in Taurus. Your core theme is going to be figuring out what is actually valuable to you. When we have Saturn, the planet of discipline and responsibility, in the sign of values and material pleasure, we find that sometimes what can happen with Saturn in Taurus is because you tend to reject the nature of the sign that it's in, or you tend to lean into the shadow side of that sign, you may find yourself dedicating a lot of your life to things that are not truly aligned with your values. Taurus rules over the second house, and this is the house of values, not just materially, but spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. And what Saturn can do is cause you to feel for some reason in your life that people have questioned your values, people have caused you to sacrifice your values, you've been placed in unfair situations where you have felt misaligned and you feel like you've been thrown off of a path that matters to you. To a sign like Taurus, the path that they take and the way that they use their energy to build something is very important to them. Oftentimes, their motivation to build comes from the fact that they are aligned with something they love, something they value, and that they hold dear. There's a very sentimental energy to it. So when you have Saturn in Taurus, you might find that something has killed that motivation along the way, whether it's something or someone that has thrown you off of your path, or it's you feel like you've been caged in a way where you can't follow what actually matters to you. So you just accept defeat. And because of that, you don't find any path fulfilling. Maybe you've started to lack motivation in your job, in your life, with your family, with your relationship, because something is misaligned, because along the way, you decided to lean into something that is not good for you. Many times, the thing that threw you off the path when you have Saturn placed in Taurus could be something around finances, maybe some type of financial instability early on, financial insecurity. Maybe you yourself had a difficult relationship with finances, but a lot of times you probably witnessed it around you. Whatever the case may have been for you, you may have leaned into a very toxic scarcity mindset, and you may find that you feel trapped in a cage of making a certain living, making a certain amount of income in order to survive, and you feel like there's nothing more for you out there. This could easily cause you to overwork in order to feel worthy, and out of fear that at any moment someone or something can take everything from you. One of the scariest things for a Taurus is to feel like they've spent so much time and energy invested into something that was ripped from their fingertips against their will. And because Taurus is also ruled by Venus, which is the planet of material pleasure, sensuality, relationships, aesthetics, there can also be a feeling where they feel like how they appear is never enough. They can feel very insecure. With Saturn in Taurus, there can be a deep physical insecurity that happens because they feel like they'll never look good enough, or they don't look the way they want to. Something possibly in their childhood made them question how they look, their appearance, and whether they're even worthy of certain love, or if anyone's going to be attracted to them, or if anyone wants them. This is a sign that is very connected to the physical reality and to the body. So anything that has to do with connecting via touch, such as romantic relationships, can be a heavy focus for Taurus placements. With Saturn in Taurus, you probably have a complex around these types of relationships because of that brimming insecurity. There may also, because of the Venus influence, be a tendency to overindulge. Because you may be trying to cope with life, you're not happy with life, where life is at, or you just have an unhealthy connection to material things, you might find that you are overindulging to fill that void of not feeling connected and aligned to what you're doing with your life and what you're investing your energy into. Therefore, you'll invest the energy you have left and the finances and resources you have left into places that are not serving you, especially when it comes to overindulging in sensual pleasures. This can be overeating. This can be maybe more toxic pleasures such as substance abuse, etc. So one of the primary lessons that Saturn is here to teach you is that you are not simply a product of your output. You tend to see worth fully connected to what you are able to produce, what you are able to do with your energy and with your life, even if it isn't aligned to you. Because of that, you make misaligned decisions because you're so worried about you yourself, as if you're a product that you're serving everybody constantly. But worth is not something that you have to earn from everybody else, and not something that you prove to yourself constantly. It is something that you embody, that you become. So some of the major lessons that Saturn is trying to teach you as Saturn in Taurus is, 1, to trust your body and your physical reality. Stop questioning it and questioning its worth at every turn. Number 2 is to treat yourself mentally, physically, and emotionally as the temple that you are. Taurus is the earth sign ruled by Venus. I like to connect it to the Empress card in tarot. And the Empress card envisions a woman very much in her feminine energy. She's relaxed, she's laying back, she's luxurious. Ultimately, when you realize your true worth and you don't just see yourself as a product that you output and of worthiness all the time, you lean into that Empress energy. This comes with treating yourself as the temple that you are. Number 3 is redefining value beyond material accumulation. Your worth is not connected to what you materially accumulate. Number 4 is to learn building slowly, intentionally, and sustainably to what is connected to your spirit is more important than building something for the sake of what you think it's going to be worth, how you think it will be perceived, how you think it will serve others or you, or doing it out of a scarcity, toxic mindset. Realize that you have the key to abundance, and Saturn wants you to learn these lessons so you can unlock that. Saturn in Gemini. One of your core themes is going to be learning to trust your intelligence and your ability to communicate. Here you have Saturn, the planet of karma and discipline, connected to Gemini, which is the mutable air sign that rules over communication and the mental process. Wherever Saturn is at in the chart, you tend to reject the nature of the sign that it's in, whether it's because you experienced things in life that made you question the nature of that sign and your expression of it, or whether you yourself just have a natural insecurity around it, or both. So Gemini at its best is naturally expressive, intelligent, witty, curious, always wants to learn, always wants to speak, and that is their power, very much so. They are connected to Hermes, the messenger god, for a reason. They are the master messengers and the master mental processors in this lifetime. However, having Saturn in Gemini means that you might have a block or a shield or wall around those abilities of your own creation or created by traumas in life that are connected to the misexpression or misunderstanding of this Gemini nature. Maybe early on in life, people told you that you need to be quiet, you need to shut up, you talk too much, you are too much, you're overwhelming, you're too curious, you ask too many questions, and whatever the case may be, whatever made you doubt this nature, you struggle to express now. You probably question your self-worth when it comes to your intellect and your ability to think outside of the box, your ability to be inquisitive in a way that is helpful and productive. You may just find that your nature is taxing. You're like, why should I bother asking any questions? Maybe in personal relationships, you're someone that tends to communicate. That is how you understand. That's how you compromise. That's how you become better as a friend or as a partner. But other people on the receiving end have been like, oh my gosh, this isn't a big deal. You turn everything into a big deal. Why do we have to talk about this again? So again, you question that nature and you further suppress it and become insecure about it. Saturn wants you to become someone who knows how to speak intentionally and exercise their intelligence in a way that moves other people. You may have had early experiences as well where you have gotten in trouble because of speaking too much, not because people have told you need to be quiet, but maybe you've gossiped, you've told secrets you weren't supposed to tell, you crossed people's boundaries with ways that you use your communication, ways that violated the boundaries of other people and got you in trouble, and now you regret it. And again, now you're insecure about that nature. The thing is, there's nothing wrong with being inquisitive and yappy and wanting to bridge the gap with other people and be curious and learn about them and find common ground. That is your magic. But you need to learn how to do it intentionally, not in a way that is for short-term gratification, because you want the short-term entertainment of gossip and because you're so curious about something that you have to ask somebody an inappropriate question to get the answer. No, it comes with becoming intentional and doing it with purpose, speaking with purpose. With Saturn and Gemini, you may also find that you have a difficult time finishing what you begin because, again, that goes back to the mental short-term gratification. Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury tends to be a very quick, short-term base sign. You can kind of see Gemini as the sign that tends to zoom in on everything like a magnifying glass. And the sister sign, which is Sagittarius, tends to zoom out and see only the bigger picture. Gemini zooms in on the details. So this may create overthinking, stagnation, analysis paralysis, if you will. You may overanalyze everything. And because of that, you either stagnate and you don't finish anything, or you feel like you just want to move on to the next thing because you're no longer excited or mentally stimulated with what you started. This also adds to a nervous system imbalance that you can experience where you feel restless and you feel anxious and you feel like, oh my gosh, I need constant stimulation. Let me scroll, let me watch TV, let me also start this project. Oh my gosh, I forgot about that email. And it can be a lot of internal chaos. Again, Saturn wants to give structure to the chaos. And when it comes to Saturn and Gemini, Saturn is not telling you there's something wrong with you by being this way. It says we just need to learn how to channel this properly so you can become the most powerful version of you. This partially comes by learning two different things. Mental mastery does not equate to knowing absolutely everything with no breaks. It comes with mental discernment and knowing that your voice, the words that you say, are like casting spells that carry deep influence and power, especially because wherever you have Saturn, you hold great power there. You just have to know with that power comes responsibility, and you must learn how to use it intentionally. So the four main things Saturn wants to teach you if you have Saturn and Gemini are: number one, speaking with clarity and purpose. Number two is to listen deeply and actively to others. 3 is turning ideas into completed forms. Number 4 is using movement to regulate the mind and the nervous system. These are ways Saturn teaches you to channel the Gemini energy into a way that is meaningful, productive, and empowering. Saturn in Cancer. Your core theme is going to be around learning how to nurture without constant self-sacrifice. With Saturn, the planet of discipline and structure, residing in the sign of emotional attunement and nourishment, there is definitely a clash between the natures. Saturn is debilitated in Cancer because their natures are so different. And debilitation, I don't want to make that sound negative. It just means that Saturn has a harder time expressing what it's trying to express in this sign, which is it's trying to bring order. It's trying to teach self-mastery. It's trying to teach you how to not make reactive decisions, emotionally reactive decisions, but decisions that are more purposeful, intentional, and serve the long run. Cancer tends to be a sign that is so emotionally in tune. It is ruled by the moon. It's connected directly to the emotional tides of life and also has a very motherly nature. So it wants to approach everything with nourishment and emotional, heart-led decisions at the forefront. Whereas Saturn is like, that's great, but we need to detach from that a bit and make sound decisions that are not just based on emotional reaction. So there's a bit of a face-off between the energies. Because of that, you might actually experience that you reject the Cancer nature and you tend to put extremely heavy brick walls around your emotions. A lot of times, because Cancer deals with the childhood directly, these wounds that cause you to put an extreme guard around your emotions could easily come from childhood, something you experienced in early life that is highly likely. Because of that, you learn that leaning on others, leaning on family, friends, whoever, could be detrimental to you. So because of that, you reject your emotions. You reject it and you see it potentially as weakness or something that will get you in trouble. Yet at the same time, you can't help but value the security of relationships and the connection of relationships. So you will self-sacrifice to stay in environments where you don't feel alone. You want to be constantly attached to people or an environment where you don't feel like you are alone. So you may overextend yourself time and time again to stay in these unhealthy environments or these environments that don't serve you or align with who you are and where you're trying to go with your life. This only creates this resentment and this boiling water under the surface that will eventually come out within you because you are constantly sacrificing what you actually want and your real emotions. You're suppressing them for the sake of other people. Cancer shares its axis with Capricorn. So Capricorn is Cancer's sister sign. And what you'll find is a lot of times wherever Saturn is placed in your chart, you'll tend to lean potentially to the sign opposite of the sign that your Saturn is in for safety. So you might find yourself leaning into some Capricorn shadow-like tendencies in order to protect yourself. So whereas you overgive and you overgive and you overextend yourself because you want to feel a sense of security and connection to others, simultaneously you're trying to suppress and detach from your emotions and come off aloof to protect yourself. And what this does is it curates environments and relationships that are not serving you at all. They're actually draining you while rejecting the relationships that do actually challenge your vulnerability. You might actually find that you run away from relationships that pop up that seem to ask for your true, authentic vulnerability, and you sacrifice those relationships and run from them for relationships that do not test your actual vulnerability and your actual heart. So one of the primary lessons you're supposed to learn is that your vulnerability is your strength. Connecting with your vulnerability and your emotions and your true heart and speaking with that and connecting with that is what is going to bring you the security and the relationships, the love, the community that you tend to seek, the family that you tend to naturally seek. But one of the things that causes you to be scared of sharing your vulnerability is rejection. But you have to learn that emotional safety starts with you. It comes from within. Learning how to emotionally regulate yourself, how to fulfill yourself, rather than constantly staying in codependent dynamics to fill that void that you can't seem to fill yourself. but you can. And that is what Saturn wants to teach you. So the 4 primary lessons and things that you're meant to learn if you have Saturn in Cancer are: number 1, emotional grounding instead of guarding yourself. Number 2 is building true aligned sanctuaries. Number 3 is reclaiming your emotional autonomy rather than outsourcing it to other people that don't actually care about you. Number 4 is becoming a source of resilience for others, but not like a source of strength in a warrior type of way. I like to see Cancer as like an emotional warrior moon goddess type. So you tend to hold your power in your feminine nature, in your motherly nature, in the way that you nourish and protect like a fierce mother. Cancer is the mother figure of astrology. So you are meant to lean into that and become a source of strength in that way, of maternal strength for other people. Saturn in Leo. You are meant to learn how to shine without permission to shine. When we have Saturn in a certain sign, we often tend to reject the natural expression of that sign, and that is where we need to learn. So with Saturn, the planet of discipline and structure, being in the sign of ego and self-expression and creativity and fun, there tends to be a rejection of your authentic self-expression, of your natural light. Leo is ruled by the sun, so I tend to see Leo energy as the literal light. Wherever we have Leo or wherever we have the sun in our charts is where we gain our life force energy. It's where we gain our light. So in this case, you are naturally rejecting the desire to shine your light into the world and express yourself authentically and creatively, which is something that is natural for Leo. Leo is not meant to hide. They are ruled by the sun for a reason. And by not hiding, they feed people life force energy. They illuminate the dark. They make things more fun, more light, more fulfilling, more rich. And you are meant to do that as well. But because of Saturn being here, something may have made you question your natural self-expression, or you have insecurity around it naturally. Maybe early on in life, parent figures told you that you were way too much, you were too dramatic, and you needed to tone it down. Or maybe someone made you question your creative pursuits. They told you that you could not be an actor or an actress. Artistic pursuits are dumb. Or why are you so full of yourself? You're overly confident, or you're too egotistical. Because of that, you may have developed a fear of being seen for who you truly are, because you think that your light is way too much, and you have learned that dimming yourself is how you play it safe. But playing it safe never caused anyone to reach real fulfillment in their own lives. And with Leo specifically, suppressing the inner child is exactly what is not supposed to happen. Leo is connected to the house of fun and play, and directly connected to the representation of the inner child and the expression of the inner child. When you suppress the inner child and you reprimand it for expressing its nature through you, even as an adult, you are constantly making yourself feel unsafe. You're increasing the insecurity in who you actually are and what you actually deem purposeful in this lifetime. You tend to hold yourself to a really high fake standard because you want to appear perfect, because you think that you yourself are not perfect. Whoa, as I'm talking about Leo, the sun is literally shining through my window so brightly. I don't know if you could see the lighting change on my camera, but that was crazy. Wow. I think that was definitely magical and symbolic. I don't know. Call me a Pisces, but I make everything symbolic. But just what are the odds? I'm talking about the sign of the sun and shining your authentic light, and the sun literally blares through my window and blinds me as I'm filming this. But I digress. You may be chasing what you have learned is perfectionism and how to appear perfect just for the sake of approval from others. Leo is connected to the ego. And what can happen here is that you're connected to the ego in a shadow way, whether it's you are chasing status and hierarchy and certain stardom or positions for self-validation that is not actually fulfilling, or whether you're chasing a sense of perfectionism for the approval of others. Leo is someone who wants to be seen by the masses. They want to cheer others on. They want to shine their light, and they want people to clap for them and with them. That is naturally the Leo energy. But how you do it is the difference between sacrificing parts of your heart and soul or fulfilling your heart and soul. And by doing that, further fulfilling the people who are clapping with you. You may have a fear of being seen because it illuminates your vulnerability as well. Agreeing to be seen in any capacity by others, especially in the way Leo wants to be seen, which is often by a lot of people, there's a vulnerability in that because you have to dare to be judged and perceived by other people. But that is something that your heart may crave. And when you allow yourself to be seen and perceived, and you repeatedly show up authentically and do so authentically, whether it's in your personal spaces or on a bigger level, such as the internet, you reinforce your own sense of self-power and your own ego in the healthiest way possible. And you gain the bravery and the momentum and the passion to continue moving forward on that path because you will feel your light being nourished and strengthened as you do this. And that is how you gain your power with this Saturn placement. Joy is not something that you earn from the crowd cheering for you, from other people clapping for you or giving you compliments. Joy is something you cultivate from within that shines your light and makes it brighter, and then nourishes people on the outside that clap for you and with you. So the core lessons that Saturn is trying to teach you with Saturn and Leo is number one, you must radiate your light from the heart. You are a heart-led sign. Leo is a heart-led, passion-led, inner child-led energy. Lean into that. Let that radiate through you and outwards. Number two is you must create structured, focused passion that is meant for the long term. And you do that by creating something meaningful, not creating something that is just meant for status, hierarchy, or notoriety. Doing something that is passion driven. Number three, connecting to that, is creating from authenticity, from an authentic place, not from one that is curated because you think it's what people want to see or what you should be doing. Number four is leading through your own sense of inspiration and passion, not through your ego. Saturn in Virgo. You are truly here for the core lesson of learning that progress is your power, not perfection. With Saturn, the planet of karma, discipline, and structure, in the sign of organization and servitude, you tend to reject the nature of Virgo. A lot of times, wherever Saturn is placed, we tend to reject the nature of that sign because something about that nature has not served us in the past. It has made us question ourselves in the past, or our nervous system remembers it as unsafe for some reason. So when it comes to Saturn in Virgo, Virgo tends to be the sign of perfectionism. It is ruled by Mercury, just like Gemini. Mercury also rules over Gemini. And Mercury is a planet that is like a magnifying glass. It hones in on the details of everything. That is why Mercury-ruled people tend to be extremely analytical and tend to notice all the details that others may not notice because they have this natural magnifying glass that they look through all the time. With Virgo, with Saturn and Virgo specifically, there tends to be a hyper perfectionism that can take over their lives. And with Saturn and Virgo, they might have developed this hyper perfectionism because they think that it's going to protect them from maybe having something like the rug pulled out from under their feet because they want to know that they have control. Something about control or an illusion of control makes them feel safe in their environments and in their relationships. And because of this, they can hyper fixate on the details of things because it makes them feel like they're in control. Perhaps something, someone, or a situation early in your life made you feel like you were not nearly enough, even though you were trying so hard. Made you feel like you never did anything right, that maybe you weren't intelligent, and now you doubt those parts of yourself and you seek to make yourself better constantly. You treat yourself like you are a constant project to appease whoever is in contact with you, whatever environment you're in. You become a workhorse in this way because you're like, I can prove myself. And even if you're not consciously thinking that, it is something that is driving pretty much all the decisions that you make. And it's something that causes you to be removed from what actually matters to you. It's this struggle with the inner critic that constantly nags you and tells you you're doing everything wrong. And that keeps you from achieving fulfillment, success, however that looks for you, and becoming your most powerful self. Ultimately, you probably feel pretty lost and burnt out on life and relationships of all kinds, because you are constantly living outside of the process, outside of the journey, because you are in your mind. You're living inside your head and inside your restless nervous system at any given moment, constantly hyperfixating, constantly seeing everything, including yourself, as a project to be improved. And you're always focused on this perfect end goal that you think will bring the happiness and the connection and the success and the fulfillment. But what really matters with you is to learn that the journey is magical itself. The journey of making those connections, creating those projects, whatever that looks like for you, is where the magic really lies. You don't need to prove yourself, kind of similar to Saturn in Taurus and probably Saturn in all the earth signs. Your worth is not connected to your output. And that is a huge theme you need to learn with Saturn in Virgo. Virgo also tends to have a natural servitude nature. Virgo shares the axis with Pisces, so both are very serving, healing natures. Because of that, you may put too much of a focus on how what you're doing and who you are serves the people around you. You need to do so from a place that is true to who you are, from a place that is present, because you cannot form connections that actually matter. You cannot create environments that actually have meaning and purpose if you are not willing to become present, if you're always living in this nagging, critical state where you hyperfixate on everything outside of yourself, including other people. Ultimately, it's learning that this feeling of empowerment and happiness and success lies in the entire process. Virgo loves the process of things, seeing something come to fruition. This is why I always recommend that Virgo placements deal with plants or gardening of some kind, because gardening is the perfect physical representation of what Virgo values. So when you translate that into having Saturn in Virgo, it's finding the magic in that process, the magic in every step of the process and what that builds in the future and the fruits of that labor. However, it's not about the fruits of the labor. It's not about the outcome, because what happens if something damages your crops and you don't get the fruits of the labor because something damaged the crops? That's enough to make you go absolutely ballistic. And if you're Saturn and Virgo, you'll blame it on yourself. And you'll be like, I didn't do this perfect enough. I didn't do this, so on and so forth. You keep yourself in this self-deprecating cycle that doesn't serve you, nor does it serve anyone around you. And that is important to you. That's one of the reasons you're so hard on yourself. But think of it as part of the journey. And that is where the magic lies. With that being said, some of the core lessons that Saturn is trying to teach you is, number one, you can provide sacred service to yourself and others without sacrificing yourself in the process. Number two is to have flexible discipline and not to get too caught up in the hiccups and the obstacles that happen, and know that there's magic in every step of the journey, and to be present with that and sit with it. Number three is to have humility rooted in competence. Virgo can tend to lean towards a very intellectual style way of expressing themselves, and they can tend to move away from humility sometimes if they're too far into the logical mind. But that is where you need to actually kind of lean into the Piscean nature a bit, which is your sister sign, and kind of lean into the divine part of everything that you do. And with this, knowing that you cannot possibly be the one that controls everything, you learn a sense of humility, and humility is essential to having the faith that you need to trust in the processes and know that not every single part of the process is at your hands, in your control. Number four is to learn that excellence is often in the slow and steady, not in the quick, short-term, perfect outcomes. Saturn in Libra. Saturn in Libra holds a core theme of learning integrity and connection and inner harmony. Saturn is actually exalted in Libra, meaning that it does very well naturally with the nature of the sign that it's in, which is Libra. So you have the planet of karma, discipline, structure, with the planet of fairness, inner harmony, and justice. Because Saturn focuses on the 10th house themes because Saturn is the ruler of the 10th house. Saturn has a natural affinity for the social systems and the social constructs, which is why it is the career planet and in the career house. Libra is the sign of the scales. The scales is the symbol here. And they are extremely refined in social systems. They tend to just know how to navigate the psyche of other people and the systems that we live within. Because of that, these two energies get along very well. So once you're able to embrace the energy of your Saturn and Libra placement, you can be that much more of a force to be reckoned with. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't have challenges. Wherever Saturn lies, whatever sign it's in, we often reject the nature of that sign. That is because Saturn is meant to teach us lessons in that sign, so we will learn our power there. It's not meant to come easy, but it's meant to be worth it. In fact, a lot of times what happens with the sign that our Saturn is in is that we will lean into the shadow side of the opposing sign. So every zodiac sign shares an axis with what's called a sister sign. For Libra, it shares the axis with Aries. So when you have Saturn in Libra, you might lean into some shadow Aries traits to protect yourself because for some reason early on in life, you equated the Libra nature unconsciously with not being safe or not being accepted or not being successful in some way. Because of that, you may lean into Aries' need to not really settle, to kind of be more flighty and to have a fear of vulnerability where you always have to feel like you are in power of yourself. Now, not to say you're completely leaned into shadow Aries energy, but it is something to think about. But some ways that you reject the Libra energy is that you may struggle with indecision. And it's not necessarily that you just don't know what you should do. You might avoid making decisions because you avoid commitment to anything, because you have found in the past that committing too much to situations, environments, and people, especially because this is the sign of partnerships, you have found that you have been left high and dry. Something has made you feel unsafe. People have taken advantage of you, whatever the case may be. Because of that, you now have a fear of being vulnerable with those people or with people in general and in your environments, and you equate indecision with safety because you never have to commit to any one thing. And you can have your eggs in so many baskets. So if one basket goes down, you feel safe because you have backup plans. But what happens is you are spreading yourself out and thin. And you're also doing so from a place that is not authentic to you because you're making those decisions or you're making those indecisions out of a place of protection, not a place of heart and authenticity. And what this is also doing is making sure that you stay independent, quote unquote independent, in order to avoid quote unquote loneliness, even though you are making yourself lonely. But you're avoiding commitment to any one thing because you feel like that gives you power and independence. But in that same vein, with rejecting the Libra nature, you may have a tendency to overexert yourself in an inauthentic way in order to please other people because you are actually scared of loneliness and independence. And this is the shadow side of Libra. The shadow side of Libra can tend to make decisions because they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to sway anything in a way that isn't good for them or good for other people. So what they'll do is they'll just kind of stand there. If you imagine them holding the scales, they don't want the scales to dip in any which direction. So they'll just stand there like this, very timidly, and they'll let other people make the decisions and do the actions, and they'll take a passive position because they're like, okay, if I just stand here and I don't say anything or do anything too abrasive, everyone will be happy, my inner harmony will not be rocked, and everything is okay. That is an illusionary way to comfort yourself. The tough fact to face as someone with a Libra nature and with the Saturn and Libra placement is that inner harmony, true inner harmony, is not achieved by lying to yourself and lying to others by taking a passive stance on everything. Saturn is the planet of commitment. It is asking you to commit for the long term to what matters to you and stand in your power by doing so. By creating a sense of fake inner harmony, you're refusing to stand in your power because you're not committing to anything. You're going against that Saturn nature. Committing can mean rocking the boat. It can mean being judged by someone. It can mean making someone upset. It's kind of like the whole idea of when you choose yourself, you're going to upset some people. It is inevitable. This is a really hard truth for the shadow side of Libra to come to terms with a lot of times, and it can cause them to do a lot of passive behaviors that aren't healthy either. They're actually quite toxic, but they think that they're doing the right thing. They may have the right intent by doing so, but it is not serving anyone. And it's especially not serving you. You are actively avoiding real relationships and real success because you're avoiding vulnerability, or you're avoiding swaying the scales in a way that you're scared to sway. And this is where you have to learn that true balance and fulfillment does not come from people pleasing. It comes from true honesty. So some of the core lessons Saturn's trying to teach you here is, number one, choosing relationships consciously. Number two is learning strong boundaries that are self-aligned. Number three is diplomacy that is strategic and isn't just people-pleasing. Number four is creating deep, meaningful, vulnerable partnerships. Saturn in Scorpio. Your core theme is to learn how to transform fear into power and ultimate rebirth. You have Saturn, the planet of karma, discipline, and structure, in the sign of ultimate rebirth and spiritual transformation. What you find with Saturn in Scorpio is that you may reject the natural Scorpio expression. This is because something in life made you question that nature when you used to express it, and now you deem it unsafe to do so. But your ultimate power lies in leaning into the expression of this sign. What we find might happen is that you might lean into the shadow side of the opposing sign that your Saturn is in. So Scorpio opposes Taurus, and Taurus is the sign that shares the axis with Scorpio. It's an axis that has a lot to do with self-transformation, using your pain and your struggles and your strife to unlock something powerful rather than staying in your misery, essentially. So what can happen with Saturn and Scorpio is that you reject emotional expression and you tend to bottle your emotions, because early in life you probably openly expressed your emotions vulnerably because you couldn't help but do so. That's what was natural to you. But somewhere along the line, certain situations were very dark that you faced. When it comes to Saturn and Scorpio, you probably experienced a lot of unimaginable darkness in personal relationships and environments in the course of your lifetime up to this point that have told you that emotions are not productive. They are not the way that you survive, and they are not the way that you cope because they are so painful to face, or they have caused you to make decisions that you regret. So you have resorted to controlling the emotions in a way that is so suppressed that you are bottling them. You may not even realize it until it's too late and you snap. This is something that both Scorpio and Taurus can really struggle with. Because you are repressing so much emotion, you can have serious control issues and jealousy issues. You might find that you lean into a lot of envy of other people, and that's because you see people who are following their passion, or maybe they seem like they've been given a better start at life than you have. And it's almost like why do I have to suffer? And how come no one else is suffering? And that's unfair. They get to be all la-di-da and run around in the meadows. And why am I stuck here in this darkness, in this hole that I can't escape? And that can turn into this self-misery that leads you to live a life of survival patterns where you're never thriving, you're just surviving. And then you build resentment towards other people who are seeming to thrive and not just surviving. Or maybe people who seem to have taken advantage of your nature. Maybe you've been in romantic relationships where you finally became vulnerable with somebody and you did open your heart, and they seem to have taken it for granted and put you into a bad spot. What that can also create is greater control issues with the Saturn and Scorpio person, because you feel like you have to do things a certain way, and you obsess over having something done a certain way because you're afraid that if not, you'll lose everything. This can kind of be connected to that scarcity mindset I mentioned in Saturn and Taurus, where you can live in such a survivalist way because of the scarcity mindset that if you don't have something done a certain way and you don't have complete control over it, you're scared. Because you're scared that the rug will be pulled out from under you. True power for a Scorpio comes from emotional honesty and vulnerability and a place of surrender. Because ultimately, the greatest expression of a Scorpio is connected to the symbolism of the phoenix. You are meant to rise from the ashes of your experiences, especially if you have Saturn in Scorpio. That is where you hold the most unimaginable strength and power in your own life. This is why your ultimate evolution might lead you to take very healing paths in life where you help the underdogs in life, because you know what it's like to be a lost soul. You know what it's like to be on the darkest side of life that a lot of people don't experience. So therefore, you know the deepest patterns of healing. You know how to alchemize the darkest experiences and the darkest emotions and turn it into power. Rather than keeping it as pain and poison that poisons your soul, you're meant to turn it into power in a way that creates monetary success for you, successful relationships, and just gives you purpose and fulfillment because you're helping other people. That is like your ultimate mission. And even if you don't relate to that, it is still the way that you find fulfillment and purpose within yourself, rather than living in a way where your emotional suppression is actually controlling you and you're under the false sense that you're controlling everything by suppressing. So what Saturn and Scorpio is ultimately trying to teach you is, number one, emotional maturity. Number two, integrating and alchemizing your shadow and teaching others how to do it as well. Number three is to lead with vulnerable truth. And number four is to become an agent of deep healing. Saturn in Sagittarius. Your core theme is to live your truth and your purpose responsibly. We have Saturn, the planet of karma, structure, and responsibility, meeting Sagittarius, which is the expansive, adventurous, philosophical sign of the zodiac. When we have Saturn in a certain placement, what can happen is you tend to reject the natural energy of that sign's expression because something along the way has made you feel threatened by expressing it safely, and now you tend to suppress the nature of that sign, and or you lean into the shadow side of that sign. So when it comes to Saturn and Sagittarius, you may for some reason have started to have a fear of being wrong. Maybe someone early in life or a situation early in life made you feel like you were dumb or like you weren't worthy of something, and now you seek to make sure that you're proving yourself, that you are powerful, intelligent, that you can think for yourself, that you can be autonomous. But in doing so, you reject a lot of authentic experiences and experiences that are actually aligned with who you are. You have a desire to be this free-spirited person that expresses themselves authentically and fluidly, but for some reason, you're afraid that you'll be judged or deemed wrong by doing so, or someone will make you feel like you're lesser than. It's kind of like the battle between maybe someone who lives the proper life, like maybe a sibling or a friend or a parent that live life the proper way. Maybe they climbed the corporate ladder. Maybe they became an executive of a company, or they are a lawyer, or they are a commendable manager of some company. But you represent the free-spirited person that loves experiencing different jobs, different positions, loves to travel. You just love to experience, and that's how you learn, and that's how you live in a way that is fulfilling. But other people have made you feel like that is dumb, it's purposeless, and it's made you self-conscious because you're afraid of being judged for the way that you want to live your life. And it's also not the way society tends to tell you that you should live your life either. But ultimately, Sagittarius is seeker of truth. That is why it tends to be the more philosophical sign. It's the sign that seeks higher knowledge. And because of that, you crave to live in complete truth to who you are, and you choose to live with purpose. And a lot of people equate purpose to what status are you going to achieve or what monetary value are you going to obtain. But you don't really see it that way. You see purpose as living a life that breathes life, living a life that is connected to passion, to fire, to spark, to experience, and living in those experiences rather than thinking that it lies in just one single path. With that being said, you may struggle with the social constructs that you have been forced to follow. You may have been the type that would skip class, or maybe you achieved learning through unorthodox means, Whatever the case may be, you want to do things on your own terms. But because you may be rejecting the healthy Sagittarius expression, you may find that you start overindulging in escapist tendencies because you're all about experience. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is connected to Zeus. So when you think of Zeus, Zeus had an insatiable, often greedy nature. Sagittarius is a sign that can struggle with that nature. And when it comes to having Saturn in Sagittarius, you might be seeking truth through escapist tendencies. You might be thinking that the seeking of truth or your philosophical mindset or your need for higher education of some kind justifies your actions, justifies, well, I needed to experience that and I needed to go there and do this, when actually what you're doing is ignoring reality and you're never bringing anything meaningful into your life. You're never developing anything meaningful. And eventually that greediness will lead to a sense of loneliness if it hasn't already. There may also be a tendency not to live what you preach. You may get stuck in being kind of this holier than thou preachy person because you think that it gives you that sense of power that you're seeking by being a quote unquote fake philosopher, as I would call it. And that's something that can give you a sense of worth. You feel like you're being validated when you see people be like, wow, you think that or you experience that, but you don't actually live that, follow that, nor do you actually believe in what you're saying. You just do so because you think it's what's going to get you accepted and get you validation. But one of the primary things that Saturn wants you to learn by being in Sagittarius is that your authentic truth is something to be lived, not to just be preached, not to be orchestrated in the mind, not to be built out of rebellion or rejection of society. It's something that you live in everyday life from your heart and from your authentic spark, because Sagittarius is a fire sign. So we're always going to be focusing on the inner fire and the spark, what ignites it, what nourishes it, and what allows it to radiate outwards. For Sagittarius, there is power in the experiences that you live if they are meaningful, aligned, and keep you open, but not if they keep you from being grounded, and not if they avoid building a framework in your life, some type of blueprint. You don't want to get so lost in being here, being there, being chaotic and all over the place. You want to give channeling and framework to your ideals, to your beliefs, and to your sense of purpose. It's kind of the idea of like bringing your experiences into a way that is teachable and meaningful, maybe by writing books or creating art, something like that. You're trying to translate those experiences into something, give them containment and structure. That is what Saturn wants for you. So some of the core lessons Saturn's trying to teach you, if you have Saturn in Sagittarius, is number 1, having wisdom earned through experience. Number 2 is having a grounded sense of open-mindedness and optimism. Number 3 is teaching through example and lived experience. Number 4 is having purpose-driven creativity that follows your experiences. Saturn in Capricorn. Your core theme is building something meaningful that lasts the test of time. When you have Saturn, the planet of karma, discipline, and structure, in the sign of Capricorn, which is the sign of discipline, structure, and long-lasting material success, pleasure, experiences, you actually have Saturn in its home sign, meaning Saturn feels comfortable here. Saturn is the natural ruler of Capricorn, so that automatically brings more power to this placement once you have evolved through the hardships of it. What you're really trying to do is ensure that you're building a long-lasting legacy that means something to you, not one that is just built out of the need for perfection, the need to feed everybody around you, the need to impress, or just to stand on top of the mountain for the sake of standing on the mountain. It needs to be connected to something that matters to you, not being a workhorse for the sake of being a workhorse. But when you have Saturn in a certain sign, even though this is the ruler of Capricorn, you'll find that you probably reject a lot of the Capricorn nature because it's something that feels unsafe to you. There's something about it that feels unsafe. So you're going to overcompensate potentially through shadow Capricorn traits things such as having an extreme resistance to failure, almost a dangerous resistance to the point that you can drive yourself insane. You can become increasingly insecure. You can become depressed, develop certain illnesses because you are so stressed and you think everything hinges on your failure. It tends to be this, I can overcome any obstacle, and I cannot bear the idea of someone seeing that I did not overcome this one obstacle. There is a struggle to admit where you might be struggling and to lean on others. You take it all on your back and you're like, if I take it all on my back, I'm proving myself, not just to myself, but to other people that I can do it. I don't need anybody. And there's a sense of independent pride as well when it comes to the shadow Capricorn traits. Because of this, you're going to overwork yourself to the bone, and you're putting this impossible pressure on yourself to succeed. And at the end of the day, you're giving yourself this anxiety and this pressure, putting yourself in an extreme pressure cooker. But at some point in time, you're going to find yourself asking, why am I doing this? What exactly am I building, and what is the purpose behind what I'm doing? And that's going to be a place where you struggle. You might find yourself in this constant loop of feeling like you're achieving and you're trying so hard, but you're just not actually getting momentum. There's a struggle with momentum. Maybe there's constant obstacles, or maybe you do obtain some type of accolade. Maybe you reach a certain hierarchy or certain status or recognition, but something about it falls short. Maybe it doesn't feel fulfilling. Maybe something happens, the company shuts down and you're without a job all of a sudden. Like, something always seems to be stopping you. So then what happens is you might be like, okay, it's okay. I just need to go on to the next mountain, overcome the next mountain. And you get stuck in a loop of overcoming the mountain for the sake of overcoming the mountain, but you never actually stop to think, is what I'm doing meaningful to me? Is there purpose behind it? And what am I doing it for? And there's a fear that you're constantly running out of time. The time is not on your side. Saturn is the time-oriented planet. All the earth signs are very connected to the reality of time, but especially Capricorn, since Saturn is its ruler. So there's this constant need to meet a deadline or to feel like you're putting this fake deadline on yourself. But in reality, success is built through being present in the journey and making sure that the present is rooted in authenticity and in alignment. It's not rushed, it's not forced. And when you're in this mentality of trying to rush it and force it and meet it by certain deadlines and doing it to prove something to whoever, you might suffer from feelings of greed or envy or maybe malicious energy because you're in a state of constant competition with everyone and everything around you, which adds to this pressure and this anxiety that you're feeling. And the other side of this mentality is not just career struggles, but relationship struggles. As an earth sign, relational things do matter to you because you are connected to the material side of life. So the relationships we experience are important to you. And one of the things Capricorn may think is valuable is building legacy for family. A lot of times there is a need to leave a legacy behind for whatever community they develop. But the thing is, the irony of that is they can sacrifice building a community or a family for this incessant need to achieve and succeed, achieve, succeed, and that becomes all that they do. Before you know it, they're isolated, they're lonely because they haven't taken the time or the care to develop those relationships because they're like, no, the sacrifice right now is sacrificing those relationships for the legacy because time is not on my side and I can't waste time. This kind of connects back to the theme I talked about with Saturn and Virgo, where a lot of where your mastery and your lessons come from with Saturn in the earth signs is around understanding time differently, not attaching so much worth to your output and how fast you can do it and how much you can output, but whether what you're putting out is valuable and what the journey held getting there. And did you find the magic in the journey and the meaning in the journey? Because at the end of the day, whatever you put out is not meaningful if the journey there was fruitless if there was nothing, no moment that you kind of just took everything in and you actually mastered something and learned something valuable. You have to trust that the path will unfold as you walk it. You can't necessarily plan out the entire path, which is what you were always trying to do. And by that, you're sacrificing the things that are actually meaningful and that will actually build the legacy that lasts, rather than being stuck in this loop of seemingly building a legacy just to have the rug pulled out from under your feet. So some of the main lessons that Saturn is trying to teach you, if you have Saturn in Capricorn, is number one, self-mastery. Endurance in redefining the type of endurance you have, endurance that is rooted in your heart and in purpose. Number three is having a sense of leadership with integrity behind it. And number four is building long-lasting achievement with self-respect and community and purpose at the forefront. Basically reframing your mind around imperfection. Imperfection is not the end of the world. It is just a byproduct of being human and a byproduct of the journey, but there is so much beauty in imperfection and unpredictability. And finding the magic in those moments along the way is what will create that long-lasting achievement. Saturn in Aquarius. Your core theme is innovation with responsibility. Saturn is the planet of discipline, structure, and karma, and Aquarius is a sign of rebellion and innovation. Saturn was actually the original ruler of Aquarius before Uranus was discovered. So because of that, there's an interesting relationship here where we do kind of have the planet residing somewhere that it resonates, but the key component that makes them so different and why Uranus ended up being the modern ruler of Aquarius is that Saturn deals more with traditional systems, whereas Aquarius wants to disrupt those traditional systems. So ultimately with Saturn in Aquarius, when I say that the core theme is innovating responsibly, you're mixing the need for disruption and innovation, but you don't want to do it recklessly. There's a tasteful way to do it. Saturn wants Aquarius to remember that in order to actually disrupt in a way that lasts, not just in a way that looks cool momentarily and ends up not amounting to anything, comes with partially playing the social system game and actually having the patience to do so real change can be made. Now, whenever you have Saturn in a certain sign, there's a lot of parts of the nature of that sign that you probably reject in your life because something has made you insecure about the nature of that sign and your natural expression of it. Or it leads you to lean into the shadow side of whatever sign your Saturn is in. In this case, it's Aquarius. Aquarius is a sign that is confidently built on rebellion, which means standing out. It means you're not afraid to be a disruptor. You're the person that's not afraid to wear different clothing, to do things differently, to speak on things differently, to think outside of the box and challenge other people's thoughts. You do not follow the status quo as an Aquarius. With Saturn in Aquarius, you might have, for some reason, doubted this part of yourself. Maybe in childhood, you were an eccentric kid. You thought outside the box and you also didn't quite understand the way other people made choices, the way they conducted themselves, and you always felt like an outsider because of it. So maybe you have started to compromise what makes you you, what makes you unique, to try and fit in. Aquarius rules over the 11th house, which is the house of community. So Aquarius really wants community. Aquarius often thinks on the larger scale of humanitarianism. How does this benefit the collective? How does this contribute to everybody? Because of that, there's a natural inclination to form bonds with people, especially fun social bonds. Aquarius also rules over internet technology. So a lot of Aquarius energy likes to connect from a distance as well. So with that being said, if you have Saturn in Aquarius, you might have developed a fear of standing out because you found that it ostracized you from the communities that you were in. It made you feel like you never belonged. So you equated it to a bad thing. Maybe people told you you were really weird and now you're insecure about the way that you think and the way that you conduct yourself. So you try to hide it and you try to suppress it when that's really where your power lies. So rejecting the Aquarius nature because of this Saturn placement might mean that you have amazing ideas, amazing thoughts that go unexpressed. These abstract ideas are never executed when they are something that needs to be executed. You're meant to disrupt with the abstract ideas that you have. Because of this, you might find yourself in an endless loop of losing yourself to the group, maybe conforming or hiding within a group. But at the end of the day, you might find yourself conforming and hiding in order to belong, but something still ostracizes you. For some reason, these relationships, these environments, they betray you, they fail you, they fall out for some reason, and you're left alone once again. Saturn wants you to realize that there is so much power in you being you. And one of the only ways you can realize that is when you're able to be independent and stand your ground in who you are without hiding yourself or conforming. On the other hand, you may be somebody who has Saturn in Aquarius who has dared to stand out, but you've done so in a way where you're almost doing it just to be defiant. Just to be rebellious for the sake of being rebellious, not with any actual purpose or path connected to your disruption, which actually just leads to unfiltered chaos, which isn't really beneficial to anybody, including yourself. In order for everlasting change and innovative progress to actually be made, it needs to have structure to it and long-term commitment. And this is where Saturn is trying to get you to learn how to channel your innovative mind and your innovative way of living your life into experiences that are tangible and relatable to other people. Your magic is in relation to community, to humanity, and people will often learn from your experiences, your unique take, your defiancy. It'll be inspiring and educational to a lot of people if you lean into it, but you have to give it a channel. You can't just be a defiant rebel for the sake of being a defiant rebel. Aquarius is a huge educator energy as well, so it's not unlikely that once you lean into this part of yourself, you become some type of educator to a group, whether it's an actual class, like you're a teacher or a professor, whether it's on an online space, like what I'm doing right now, or whether it's in a work environment, whatever the case may be. But a few of the lessons that Saturn is trying to put at the forefront of your life with Saturn in Aquarius is number one, turning innovation into reality, not just a defiant thought. Number two is building systems that actually evolve the collective in some way. And number three is leading collective change with integrity and purpose. Saturn in Pisces. Your core theme is going to be bringing the unseen and spirituality and grounding it into reality. When you have Saturn, the planet of structure, discipline, and karma, meeting the sign of spirituality, creative expression, and the unknown realms, the unconscious realms of life, you have a very interesting combination of energies that don't quite agree with each other. Saturn is, again, all about bringing structure and containment to chaos, meaning that it gives things form, a physical form, so that way they can actually serve a purpose. Pisces is ruled by Neptune. Neptune is the ruler of the unconscious realms, which is why we often associate Pisces with spirituality and spiritual concepts, the esoteric, quantum mechanics, etc. But this is difficult for Saturn to deal with because Pisces and Neptune have the connection to the omnipotent energy of the universe. It's what we can't see. It's beyond our reach. And because of that, that's what creates this mysterious, mystic aura to everything that revolves around Pisces and Neptune. Saturn likes when something has a form and is tangible and understandable. So essentially what Saturn is trying to do is give some type of form to these outward, unconscious, subconscious, spiritual concepts. But because Saturn's placement often causes us to reject the nature of the sign that it's in, you might have rejected your Piscean nature in this way. Pisces tends to be at its best when it can express its mystic nature in some way, when it can master its mysticism, often through creative expression, through arts of some kind, or through healing mediums of some kind. Pisces often doesn't do well when they feel like they're caged or contained and they feel like they can't properly express their fluid, free-spirited, spiritual nature. So with Saturn and Pisces specifically, The nature you might reject about yourself is your emotional intuition and your emotional attunement, your instinct. These are things you might reject because early on in life, this sensitivity, this connection to these mysterious energies were branded as weird. You were branded as too sensitive, or they caused you to get burned by people in the past. And Pisces is a sensitive nature. And I don't mean sensitive in a weak way. I mean sensitive in the fact that they are the energetic sponge of astrology. They soak up everything. And this is why their emotional attunement and their intuition are so powerful. Because they are experiencing the influence of energies that a lot of other people aren't, when they tend to cry, when they tend to have a hard time, when they tend to be sad, whenever they're experiencing anything, especially as a child, many around them don't understand them and tend to reprimand them for that sensitive nature. With Saturn in Pisces, this could especially be true. For whatever reason, you have found that the connection to your heart, to your emotions, and to that part of yourself is seen as bad and seen as unworthy of love and attention and understanding. So you have learned to reject that part of yourself. Pisces is the escapist sign, so it is associated with forms of escapism. So in order to kind of reject this nature or escape it, as a Saturn in Pisces, you may have turned to various forms of substance abuse. Now, substance abuse, I actually don't just consider this to be drugs outright. I consider it to be any time you're indulging in a vice that is addictive and causes you to avoid something in yourself and in your environment. So this could easily be codependent relationships, for example, but you will find yourself escaping into places that actually hurt you more, but they're giving you short-term feelings of not having to deal with the weight of being a Saturn in Pisces and being so connected to everything that's happening. The 12th house is the house that Neptune and Pisces rule over, and this is the house that is connected to everything. This is why Saturn and Neptune are such a weird energetic combination, because Saturn represents containment and boundaries. Neptune wants to dissolve boundaries. It doesn't want any boundaries. So Pisces are naturally connected to anything and everything that exists, unseen and seen. So if you have Saturn in Pisces, you tend to be naturally attuned to the weight of the world energetically. You tend to feel everything happening on a collective level. So you want to get away from that. You want to escape it so badly because you feel like it hasn't served you in the past. It has only caused you problems, caused you strife and hardship. But simultaneously, while you try to escape this, you will often have such weak boundaries yourself that you will find yourself in places that use and abuse your kind, heart-led nature. And rather than necessarily seeing these dynamics as bad, you might actually have a way of delusionally romanticizing that pain that you went through and correlating it with something valuable and important and nostalgic and meaningful. And this can be another form of escapism, where you are ignoring reality because you feel like it's subsiding the pain, at least temporarily. So really, one of the primary things that you're attempting to be taught by Saturn here is that true enlightenment in your own life and outwards comes through active engagement with everything. The good, the bad, the shadow, the light, and integrating it all, not trying to escape it all. So some core lessons that Saturn's trying to teach you with this placement is number 1, emotional discipline. Number 2, having divine sacred boundaries with yourself. Number 3 is being able to heal others through lived wisdom. And number 4 is making the intangible tangible and creating meaningful, creative experiences that people can immerse themselves in and consume for greater healing and for greater happiness. What is your Saturn sign? Leave it in the comments below and let me know if you resonated, or leave other tips about your Saturn sign that others can read, because we all are learning all the time. I'm always a student. And be sure you don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss Saturn in every single house and other future videos like this one. But until I see you next time, thank you so much for being here. I'm forever grateful for your presence. Adios.